His opponent is Andrew McLaughlin. Andrew is playing Affinity, which, all things honest, Ryan, I think Ozzy stands a great chance in this matchup.
Scred and Lightning Bolt are excellent here. Anger of the Gods, Ratchet Bomb, 2 of both of those in the main deck. And last weekend, Ozzy did it with 4 Draconic Roar. This weekend, he's packing 4 main deck Abrade.
All right, so it's sad to see the Draconic Roar go, but Abrade is a significantly better Magic card, especially in a matchup where all your opponent's cards are artifacts. I suppose Abrade's fine.
Yeah, mighty fine here.
Starting on 2 snow-covered mountains for Ozzy. He is playing 2 Scrying Sheets in his deck, so it is relevant that they are snow-covered.
Yeah, when Scrying Sheets is not also a mountain under the Blood Moon, you can draw some extra cards.
Well, turn 2 Steel Overs here from Andrew McLaughlin will get met by Anger of the Gods. Ozzy was on the play on a mulligan to 6, but that should undo the mulligan as he scores a 2-for-1.
Yes. You really need your Steel Overseer to survive in games like this. See if Andrew's able to mount some additional pressure. Going from 0 is real tough, though.
Well, he'll try for another Steel Overseer and bring a Signal Pest along with it. So recreates the board that was swept away. Ozzy looks like he has a Blood Moon, 4th Mountain, Cavern of Souls. There is a Thundermaw Hellkite up at 5 mana. That's not going to do too much. He's going to go ahead and Blood Moon out his opponent.
It's not at its finest in the matchup, but turning off Inkmoth Nexus and Blinkmoth Nexus is certainly worth a card.
Right. So what are we looking at that it cuts off? It cuts off the creature lands. Outside of that, he doesn't actually have... he has 2 Master of Ethereum that might be stranded.
Yep, they can be difficult to cast. This build is a 3 Galvanic Blast build, obviously. The red mana not an issue here.
So, Etched Champion is cast by Andrew, and an activation of Steel Overseer means he will swing on in for 1. I've noticed it's going to be hard for Ozzy to get rid of that Etched Champion. Even through a Blood Moon, Darksteel Citadel counts as an artifact here.
Right, and he has drawn a redundant copy of Blood Moon. That one's quite poor here.
He can try to race, and that's what he'll do, though. Thundermaw Hellkite is the play. It swings in for 5, and Andrew goes to 15.
Currently, Andrew doesn't have any blockers for the Hellkite. The Signal Pest only is a kind of a flying attacker. It does not have reach as a blocker.
Yeah, I do think Andrew, as the board stands, wins the race. But if you give Ozzy another top deck Thundermaw, that could turn around.
Right. Only one of that specific dragon, but a Glory Bringer would supplement it really well. I guess I wouldn't mind a Storm Breath Dragon. But here's another Steel Overseer for Andrew. His clock is now really quick.
Yeah.
Activation from the first one. So the Pest is a 2. The Champion is a 4+1. So this is 7 here. And I believe this is going to be lethal in the following turn.
It's a big hit. Looking at the dragons, actually, for Ozzy, yeah, it's the same setup. One of the Glory Bringers from last week turned into a this is a Singleton Thundermaw. Otherwise, it's the same 10.
Right. And Ozzy's draw has been heavy on these snow-covered mountains. Plays 1 for turn, 1 left over in the hand.
Storm Breath swings in to put Andrew down to 10.
And Andrew has 11 power, ignoring the Battle Cry trigger. That's going to push him to 14 if nothing changes here.
And we see a Galvanic Blast out of McLaughlin. That should certainly do it. Upstairs, Ozzy's to 8. 2 cards in hand, one of them's a Blood Moon. Even if his other card were a Scred, I don't think that matters.
Yeah, there's just some draws in his deck that could buy him a turn, but he's just dead here on the crackback, and we'll be going to game 2 in just a second. Yeah, 1-0 for Andrew here.
All right, so Andrew McLaughlin taking the first game. Ozzy's deck scored a pretty decent Anger of the Gods, but at that point, when you look at the actual spells that did anything, it's just was a Thundermaw and a Anger of the Gods.
Yes.
Yeah, and you're going to need more cards than that.
2 heavy on lands, 2 heavy on the Blood Moon. The first one's acceptable, but you have to supplement it with some Lightning Bolts, some Screds. Once Andrew starts activating Steel Overseer, the game gets out of hand really quickly. So
Ozzy's sideboard has some hits here. We're going to look at 3 Molten Rain, 2 Damping Sphere, and it's mono red board, so a lot of these will be hate for specific matchups. 2 Dragon's Claw, 2 Relic of Progenitus, 2 Ricochet Trap, 2 Shattering Spree, a third Anger of the Gods, and then a Boil.
The 2 Shattering Sprees are excellent.
Sure, it's Affinity, great.
The 3rd Anger of the Gods, that does a trick. That is a fine card.
Yeah, and are you interested in anything else here? I'm not. I guess nothing's great. I'm looking at cards like Blood Moon out of Ozzy, or things that I might want to side out.
You can only make a lateral shift, really. You could reach for Molten Rain over Blood Moon. It answers some of the same things. You want to trim on Blood Moon, as you saw in Game 1, drawing multiple copies not very good. Turning off the creature lands is actually a significant box.
Yeah.
I think leaving in maybe 2 copies is totally reasonable, and Molten Rain's a downgrade in that department.
Okay, so you think the ability to hit 2 creature lands is better than the possibility of 2 damage?
Yes, especially because he's backing that up with another copy of Anger of the Gods. That card doesn't impact creature lands in any way, so being able to deliver that 1-2 punch can be a big deal if the rest of his draw shakes up in a good way.
All right, so on Andrew's side, moving against sideboard, he's playing against, all right, he has a pretty good idea of what it's up against. Scred Red, 2 Ancient Grudge, 2 Damping Sphere of his own, 2 more Etched Champion. I think he's on a 1 Champion, 2 Master of Ethereum on his main deck. So 2 Gear per Aether Grids, 2 Stubborn Denials, 2 Thought Seizes, a Blood Moon of his own. Don't think we want that. Graph Digger's Cage and Rest in Peace.
The best cards here, the 2 Etched Champion. Ultimately, he's playing against kind of a mid-range deck, so a creature that dodges removal, definitely where you want to be. There's some other cards you can reach for. The Stubborn Denials and the Thought Seizes are both fine cards. I think Stubborn Denial matters more than Thoughtseize in this matchup. You don't really want to grab any of the creatures from Ozzy's deck. You can swing through a Thunderbreak Regent, a Stormbreath Dragon, whatever. But countering an Anger of the Gods can be a big deal.
Yeah, we saw last game Ozzy made Thundermaw Hellkite, and Andrew was pretty free to ignore it. It really seemed like what we cared about was, did Ozzy have removal? And in that sense, I guess Stubborn Denial is just going to outperform Thoughtseize.
Right. You can also draw it once you're already set up. Part of the equation is that Andrew's not trying to stop Ozzy from setting up. He's very much the aggressor in this matchup. Top decking Thoughtseize is kind of poor. You're often giving Ozzy a window to leverage whatever he wants when you draw that, but the Stubborn Denial helps you push an advantage whenever you draw it, as long as you haven't already been swept.
Sure. So, looking at Ozzy's threats then, I believe that he can control the early game, especially, Lightning Bolt, Scred, Abrade, Anger, and now he's going to have Shattering Sprees. All right, I expect in the first 2 turns, some artifacts are going to get smashed up.
Right.
What I didn't like out of that game was when Ozzy tried to turn the corner, he baited 5/5 Haste Flyer for 5, and that was really the whole card, and it wasn't too impressive. Is there cards that do better here, cards he's looking for, or is that,
I'm actually really intrigued by this deck leveraging Sarkhan Fireblood as the win condition. Trim some of these dragons, spend your time looting away, or rummaging rather, those extra mountains, drawing in removal spells, and then building up to that Sarkhan Fireblood -7. Not casting dragons, but rather using your card filtering engine to ultimately amount to a game win. Makes like 4 5/5 dragons or something like that.
Yes, Sarkhan. Right.
Yeah, some of the power of the deck is you make the 2 extra mana, you can power out your dragons, but for it's -7, it starts from 3, is create 4 5/5 dragons with flying.
Sure.
So I think that trimming the Blood Moons certainly makes sense. Trimming some of these dragons, the 5-mana ones, more so than the Thunderbreak Regents.
Yeah.
And then leaning a little bit heavier on Sarkhan to actually close the game.
Yeah, I actually do like that, kind of being this mono-red control deck. If he gets a hand that lets him set up for Sarkhan, plus to discard, and find removal, ultimate.
Right. There are windows where specifically Thundermaw Hellkite can be worth some cards. If McLaughlin has not added any additional toughness to some Vault Scourges, you're kind of Flame Tongue Cavoing down the Scourge. Not a huge win, but it's one that's worth tracking.
Yeah.
Whereas Stormbreath Dragon, not that great. Glorybringer can have a similar effect too. So the Stormbreath Dragons are the immediate cut in my eyes.
Yeah, Stormbreath Dragon's doesn't seem great here. Protection from white's not relevant. Without Sarkhan, actually you can't even use Sarkhan mana to use Monstrosity on it, so...
Yeah, just to cast dragon spells.
Right, just to cast. I was wondering if that was a possibility, but no. Ozzy again on 6 cards, but he looks like he's keeping on 6, and here's our second game.
Ooh, definitely a Shattering Spree in the holdings.
Yeah, Shattering Spree and Abrade. I don't know about his land count. I think we're on... Ooh, we have a Scrying Sheets in there, actually.
All right.
That could be great.
It can. You need a 3rd land to start working with it, but it's a good start.
Some cogs for Andrew. Welding Jar and Springleaf Drum to start.
Welding Jar green lights you if you have that turn 2 Steel Overseer. It makes it a harder task for Ozzy to deal with that, and you can start on tapping and activating.
What I do like is, you see Andrew making a Memnite. Ozzy has an Abrade here, and he can set up for something like end step, Abrade away the Welding Jar, untap, Shattering Spree, everything.
Yeah, that would be a big swing.
We see Etched Champion.
And that's a huge win for Andrew. He does have that Darksteel Citadel as backup. You can't overload the Shattering Spree in a way where it destroys the other artifacts and can target the Etched Champion because it all resolves at once.
Well, as long as he manages to keep Ravager counters and Cranial Platings off this Etched Champion, maybe we're okay.
Yeah, controlling that is going to be important. You can abrade something here. You do want to go to work.
Yeah.
You want to try to get to a position where it's just Etched Champion plus a Darksteel Citadel with that Inkmoth Nexus, all the mana taps, so that can't be activated. It's tough because Affinity just throws so many artifacts on the battlefield so quickly.
Well, let's see what he wants to abrade here. There's an argument for the Welding Jar, actually. The argument for the Welding
it's destroy an artifact. That one's not a creature. More your stuff like Lightning Bolt, Scred can target the Memnite.
Yeah, well, my thought is that he targeted Memnite. And the problem is that if you use Abrade on anything but the Jar, you're giving your opponent the option of Jar or Thing B. So I might as well just like take that option away and just hit the Jar.
Yeah.
He did go over the Memnite, and as it turns out, Andrew elected to just bin the Memnite.
Mm-hmm.
Third land here from Ozzy.
Can you regenerate off Shattering Spree? Yeah, he still has that scrying sheet, so he'll at least be making his fourth land. Looks like he's calling a judge here. Notably, Shattering Spree is a little bit different than Shatter Storm.
Right.
If Ozzy was casting
Right.
Shatter Storm, it makes it so you can't regenerate artifacts. So you can't just leave behind Etched Champion Welding Jar. The Shattering Spree can't really poke through that, whereas a Shatter Storm would be able to.
So if Shattering Spree, you double target on Replicate, you can punch it through a Welding Jar, right?
Right.
So if there's a Cranial Plating, I need to get rid of it, I can replicate 2 copies of Shattering Spree at your Cranial Plating, and a Jar won't save it.
Mm-hmm. I am slightly curious, especially because he's on 4 main deck Abrade, and he has all these pinpoint spot removal spells, Anger the Gods on 3, of the decision to play Shattering Spree over Shatter Storm. Neither of these cards really matter in your KCI matchup. They're mostly going to be for Affinity. And Shatter Storm seems to matter in more of the games. At least that's my impression with the way that things are playing out on the composition of the deck, experience playing with and against Affinity.
Yeah, I mean, you're right. So normally when you play Shattering Spree in these mono-red decks is if you need to fire it off on the early turns. But with so much, you said, cheap removal, you can afford to wait until turn 4. You probably have something else to do in the meantime.
Right. I imagine the Judge Call pertains to this Shattering Spree being cast. Wanted to see about maybe being able to overload and hit the champion in this window, but as you see, it's just targeting the drum and the Welding Jar. And Andrew will regenerate the Etched Champion in response. And that's the window where you want to do it because you maintain Metalcraft through that resolution. You'll have to regenerate shield after the resolution there.
So he chose replicating 1 at the Welding Jar, 1 at the Springleaf Drum, and both artifacts were hit here. We'll get exactly confirmation on what happened. If Ozzy had made replicated it 3 times, 2 at the drum and 1 at the jar, this would have happened. Not entirely certain the process that led us here, but this is where we are. And it looks like Andrew's going to go ahead and re-establish Metalcraft with that Springleaf Drum.
Yep. Gets to get Metalcraft online. Still has that Inkmoth Nexus on reserve, so he was representing that at the beginning of the turn anyway.
And here's Arcbound Ravager. Swing in for 2. And now you have to be worried on Ozzy's side. You don't want Ravager counters getting stuck onto that Etched Champion.
Yeah. There's a little bit of a dance with that because you can't go too heavy on the Ravager on this window because you knock yourself off Metalcraft.
Ozzy draws another Abrade. Sand looks to be 2 more Abrades.
But even a 3/3 Etched Champion's a big deal here, though.
All right, plays Scrying Sheets. We'll help him maybe draw some more lands. Etched Champion is just being a pain for Ozzy's deck right now.
When I lose to Affinity, it tends to be games like this. Etched Champion is just the heavy lifter in the mid-range matchups.
Man, on Ozzy's side, I wanted to wait to figure out a board. So like that last turn, if he had the single damage removal spell to get the champion off, I'm pretty into it.
I just don't think you get the window you're describing. I hear
Yeah,
what you're saying.
yeah, you
want to
probably
play
don't.
for it, but playing with and against Affinity, it just never happens. Andrew had what, 4 cards in hand at that point in time. How many of them do you think were artifacts?
Yeah, I mean, I was hoping that turn when the spree happened, that Ozzy, after it resolved, was going to tap that last mountain and say lightning bolt.
There's no window if the jar is activated, is the thing.
Oh, because if the jar's already targeting the champion?
Right. Because you still maintain Metalcraft while the drum is being targeted. So the drum's still on the table. That's the 3rd artifact, Darksteel Citadel, Champion, Springleaf Drum.
Yeah.
So you regenerate. There's no window to use your damage spell there. Metalcraft's still online. Then at the end of that, the regen shield is up. That can dodge 1 removal spell.
So Abrade is destroying target artifact on Arcbound Ravager. And in response, Andrew's going to sacrifice 1 card to the Ravager and then use the Ravager to put 2 counters on the Etched Champion. It'll attack in for 4. There's still that Citadel and the ability to activate Inkmoth. You're right. It's just you can't turn it off.
It feels so close on the other side, right?
Yeah.
There's just 3 artifacts, but it's like, oh no, I have to destroy a thing and destroy the Inkmoth Nexus before I can target that champion.
Well, here's Stormbreath Dragon. Ozzy can try to race back. It's not going to win the race as it is.
It's just trading damage currently with the Etched Champion.
Right.
2 more lands and he can monstrify it, but that's just +3. There's not going to be cards in Andrew's hand, maybe 1.
Yeah, it's unlikely that he'll get extra damage off that. But Andrew's at 16. We'll go back over to his side. He's attacking, looks like, for 5 per turn right now with that Battle Cry.
Yep.
And there's Blinkmoth Nexus. That actually could add additional damage.
Yeah, currently he's only able to attack with the Inkmoth Nexus. It's worth looking at getting that poison damage just in case things go horribly awry for whatever reason. You want to make sure you maintain some mana to activate your creature lands in response to artifact destruction spells.
Right. Yeah, make sure that champion doesn't go anywhere.
I don't mind this attack for 2 poison. I would be wary, and I like that Andrew did not use the Blinkmoth to pump this.
Right.
That poison damage is not what the game is about. Maintaining Metalcraft, protecting your Etched Champion is very much what the game is.
So Ozzy drops to 9 into 2 poison. We go back to his turn. He's gotten some removal in his hand. Now we're going to look at that Scrying Sheets. And Ozzy can try to draw more lands with that.
Yeah, it's really just going to be the snow-covered mountains and the second Scrying Sheets it can find. No Cold Steel Hearts in this build.
Yeah. Well, there's a snow dragon, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I know, right?
I have the art. I have the art. It costs 7.
It's bad.
Rhyme Scale Dragon?
There we go. Yeah. Because there's the owl, the blue one.
Rhyme Feather Owl. That one I know. Yes.
Nice.
Nailed it.
Nailed it. He doesn't play that.
No.
Here's Anger of the Gods from Ozzy. And Stubborn Denial. Sure.
He has a ferocious. He's got the Etched Champion. That's 4, and protecting the Signal Pest. That keeps the pressure up. That means he has a 2-turn clock here, though the Blinkmoth also providing that. Maintaining that artifact is a big deal, though. If he can defend this Etched Champion, he will win the game. And actually, this is a big deal because the Stormbreath Dragon's on blocks. The Etched Champion's getting across for 4 regardless. It's going to be 5 with the Battle Cry, but you don't have to throw away the Pest.
Not until the last turn.
Right. And now you have the Pest and the Blinkmoth Nexus providing that additional point of damage.
Well, how about Master of Ethereum?
Yeah, that's another additional point of
good
damage.
Here.
Yeah.
Swing for 5. Ozzy will go to 4. You went back to the difference between Shattering Spree and Shatter Storm in this deck, and that's a deck-building decision as Ozzy's going to pick him up here. He's got 2 lands.
Yeah.
Looking ahead, this game, I'd want to revisit that decision out of the board. If you switch up that Shattering Spree for a Shatter Storm, I think Ozzy can get the W in that one.
Right. It takes you 1 more turn, but you saw the way the game played out. Your dragons aren't hitting harder